Good evening, everybody, and welcome to this final Grounded live event. Just want to remind everyone that there is a Q&A chat box, so we really want today to be interactive because the topic of today's discussion is "It Won't Work on Our Farm," debunking the myths and discussing the truth about regenerative farming. So if you have a particular um, case against or reason against Regen Ag that you want to throw in the chat that we can discuss, we'd love to talk about it. If you've got some common ones in your area, or if you've overcome some on your own farm, we'd love to hear those types of stories as well. So really looking forward to what you all have to say in the audience. But with me today, as always, is my co-host, Stuart Johnson. Stu, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you, Kyle. How are you?
Hey, I'm doing well. How are you?
Okay, I'm okay. I think I've got a few Wi-Fi problems, so if it's been difficult, let me know if you can't hear me properly. But yes, everything's good. The weather has turned a little corner and it's looking sunny out there. So yeah, no, it's all nice up here at the minute, which is nice to say that after a couple of hairy months there. So yeah, how's things down there?
Good, same. It's been beautiful. Yeah, we were just saying before the meeting, before we switched it on, how nice it is to have at least a couple days of sun, and it feels like your whole mood changes. You can take on the world when the sun shines for a couple days in a row. So, get really excited for that.
Yeah, that's
Mhm.
great. Good,
Mhm.
good. I'm glad everyone's getting a little bit of a reprieve from the high straw and hay prices and get some things done outside, which I know James has. So I'm going to ask him about that in a minute. So that's good.
Mhm.
Do you want to explain who we've got on, Kyle, here?
I would love to. So we have two guests tonight. We have James Johnson of Mallard Grange Farm in Ripon. I hope I'm saying that right. The farm is run by James and his father, Charles. So without further ado, James, do you want to give us a little more context than I've just given?
Yeah, thank you very much, Kyle. It's a pleasure to be here tonight. It's an honor to be asked to be part of the Grounded podcast. So no, thank you very much. So yeah, a bit more about Mallard Grange. So we are a family foot-run tenanted farm. So we're on a generational tenancy. We are predominantly a grassland farm running Aberdeen, Angus, Hereford, cross Suffolk cows, a flock of Aberfield Highlander ewes currently. We have laying hens and we also grow some arable, but that is slowly getting reduced due to livestock increasing. Love to see a nod in there, Stuart. Well done. So the farmers, we've probably moved away from more of a conventional system over the last 7 years, really moving to more this way, and we've slowly got more and more confident and built up, and more things are getting added to it. We have a pick your own flower field, pumpkins. We also have self-catering units and a tourism bed and breakfast as well. So we try and tap into all sorts of different things.
Excellent. Can't wait to dig more into that. And so our second guest is Matt Griffin. He's farm manager at Needpath Farms. Again, I don't know why we're having me read these, but I hope I'm saying it right. On the Scottish borders.
It's a fun
Matt,
game, Kyle, listening to you butcher the UK language here. So
I'm sure it's amusing for everyone but me. So, Matt, do you want to give a little more intro on yourself?
Yeah. So we're in Peebles, just in the Scottish borders. The team and I look after about 2,500 acres, sheep and beef, upland environment. We sort of run from about 450 feet up to about 1,250, 1,300 feet. We have I've been here 5 years. I came here to replace the previous manager, been quite conventional, and we've had quite a different focus on grazing and soil. We have a reasonable scaled compost project here in the shed, and a worm farm, and we just really challenging the thinking that profitable farming can't be profitable without subsidy, and resilient in all of these sort of changing times.
All right. Thank you very much for that.
Thanks.
Go ahead, Stu.
Yeah, no, I was going to say thanks for that, Matt. That's it's good, and I'm glad that we've got a little bit of a little bit of the composting where we sort of mentioned there, because I think we'll talk about that in a bit as well. And James, you've obviously got a few diversification things going there, which is good to hear, and we'll talk about that a bit as well. I think what I would like to start with, if that's all right, Kyle, if we jump straight in. I guess the theme of this one is we'll work on our farm. Now, that's obviously something that we hear everywhere all the time. And I guess from your points of view, both of you two, at what point were you saying it won't work on our farm to the point where you were saying, actually, how can I make this work on our farm? You know, was there a turning point? Was there something that suddenly made you jump in there and think, actually, maybe there's some logic to what's been said here? One of you can start. I don't mind who.
I mean, I'm happy to start, Matt, if that's all right. So I'll be honest, I think the biggest, we've always been ones for challenging the norm in one form or other, but I think it got to a point where the big turning point for us, I think, was that winter of 2019 into the spring of 2020, where you went from an unbelievably wet autumn to a ridiculously dry spring, and crops were struggling. We were thinking, you know, you couldn't get onto land if you wanted to try and get something done, and then forage was dire, and it just was like, well, this what we're doing here is not working. But what can we do? And I think for that one, it was it kind of linked in with a bit of loss of social life through the beginning of COVID, and then trying to come up with some areas of trying to keep ourselves busy. And you know, I say you come across the big man, you know, Gabe, and started watching a lot of stuff on YouTube and looking at all that, you're thinking, right, actually, there is a possibility of doing something different here. And from there, like say, my father and I, we went down to Groundswell. We spoke to a couple of other farmers that had done a few things, and we thought, right, let's give this a go. So we started off in one field of herbal lays, and the great thing is, for confidence-wise, we got a payment on it. So we started one field of that, and it out-yielded everything else without even an ounce of fertilizer on it. So it was like, well, this is just a bit of a no-brainer. But obviously that came with then, right, if we're going to herbal lane and management style and that sort of thing helps to improve it all. And like I said, we changed our drilling mechanism on our small bit of arable that we have, and went to more of a direct drill system. And next thing you know, we can travel whenever we want. We've got no worries about any issue when it comes to weather. We're a lot more resilient. And again, you know, with the change of government funding, all that, it was all about building resilience and doing it with what natural resources we have. And I think that's where it stemmed. But it was I suppose it was a big thing. It was finding out there was another option, and then delving into it. And like I say, it all just makes sense. It's like a light bulb moment, thinking, but it linked back into what what our grandparents should have probably done a little bit more than what we had done as well. So also maybe we had a level of relatability. You know, my father remembered how his father farmed and things like that. You know, it's just like going back to it with a bit more science involved. And I think that's the thing of it. It's that we're only trying to maybe learn some of the things that we had already learned previous, with a bit more science and understanding behind why it does that and how to optimize it. So yeah, that's how we got going, really.
And that sounds like you maybe you're blessed with family that were very open to that? Or did you have a good battle along the way?
I think my dad will more happily admit that we did have a little bit of battling on the way, because the difference is my dad and I both got taught the same, even though we're maybe 40 years apart. But it was a point where obviously you're suddenly going to saying, actually, there's another opportunity here. But like my dad always said, his yields were dropping all the time. That the yields should have been increasing. He knew there was something not right. Browser hills that were just losing that layer of topsoil, going that bit of rough and ready, taking more working down. He's always run livestock on the farm. He's run the farm. There was just little bits that we decided to alter. And yes, conversations were had. And that's why we had to try it. It wasn't going to be a whole field scale. And like when we went for a direct drill, we went for the middle ground. So we were both happy. The plough and power harrow was still sat there just in case. We had to find a compromise, but that's good because that makes us understand each other's better. And I'm really lucky. Our family unit is tight, and we have difficult conversations. We work forward and we give each other opportunities as long as they're proven, and give choice to try. So And then the team around us who work with us, Knox, the young lad, and Tony that works for us as well, they're really keen to push on as well. So that helps drive us further forward. So it's a whole Mallard Grange team entity, and we all want to give it a go and push it forward.
Awesome. Thanks for that, James. Matt, do you want to throw anything in here? How did yours develop? I know you've come in obviously with a specific job to do at your place, so it's a slightly different take, but I wonder if you want to take us back to, I guess, let's start from the start. At what point did you suddenly think, or have you always been this way inclined, that think that maybe there's different ways of doing this?
Yeah, it's quite funny when you frame it like that, this way inclined. If I go right back to 2000, I went out to New Zealand, and in 2001 I did my holistic management. 2001, 2002, and I ended up staying in New Zealand for 14 years, managing sheep and beef farms. And when you're in a brittle environment, the starkness over the fence of the difference between reasonably good grazing and perhaps set stocking conventional grazing is quite stark. So it was quite an easy convince for me in those environments, and you were getting long, prolonged periods of dry, and you could really see the benefit of it. Fast forward to 2018, I came back to the UK for various reasons, but one of the reasons was that Brexit was happening, subsidies were going, and I've been out the country for 10 years, and I thought everybody would be thinking differently around soil and growing grass. That wasn't really the case in my personal experience. And it took me a while to find the owners here. And the owners wanted to change tact in terms of building resilience into their system. I just happened to be in the right place at the right time to land the job here. You come into a system that is sort of ticking along. It's not particularly resilient, but heavily reliant on inputs and heavily reliant on subsidy. And when you're in Scotland, you think, well, it's fine. The grass is always going to grow because we'll never get dry periods. And in my 5 years that I've been here, I've heard locals say that we've had the driest spring, we've had the driest summer, we've had the, et cetera, like we've all experienced. So I've come in to try and build a system that can sort of navigate its way around those climatic changes, those policy changes, so I've got this belief in me about the soil and building resilience, and all of the things that we're all doing, and it's been a real up and down ride, and it's been a challenge, but we're tracking in a positive direction.
What was the mindset of farmers like in New Zealand without that subsidy? So from what I understand in my limited knowledge, the government ripped them away, and all at once. And was it the 80s or 70s? I can't remember. But so you were there in the early 2000s into the 2010s. What was life like as a farmer? Did they have a different mindset because they didn't have that crutch? They had nothing to lean on. So did they lean on their own innovation more, would you say, than British farmers?
I certainly had that feeling, Kyle, when I was there, and it was definitely, there was a big focus on grass. I think at that time it was a big focus on production from grass. So along came that a little bit of heavy inputs at times. So maybe that's probably changed in the last 20 years now, and there's a bit more focus, a bigger focus on the soil and stuff. I did my holistic management with 2 other guys, and there was 1 other course that year running with 3 people on it. So there were 6 of us in the whole of New Zealand that did their holistic management. Now, I think if you want to do your holistic management, you sort of got to probably wait 18 months to get on a course. So it was sort of Alan Savory had been doing it for a while, but it was just at the start. But definitely losing those subsidies drove innovation, and the innovation came about growing higher yields of dry matter from grass production.
Mm-hmm. And I would also assume that the Savory course is more palatable or very palatable in a brittle environment in New Zealand because he comes from that brittle environment. So a lot of those messages probably translated to what you were experiencing there. Would that be correct?
Yeah, definitely. 100%. 100%.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Excellent. Excellent. Yeah, so I don't really have a question. I just had a way that I wanted to set up maybe the discussion moving forward. And Stu, you can hit my mute button if you think I've gone too loony. But with the topic being it won't work here, it being regenerative agriculture, there's always that debate as to what exactly is regenerative agriculture, and you ask 1,000 people or 40 people in the audience, I'm sure 40 people would give you 40 different definitions. So when I run into this issue and when I speak to farmers and people close to home and people in my home, the conversation is always, yeah, regen ag won't work because it's too risky, it doesn't pay, weeds and pests will take over and all that. But, you know, I said, wait, back up, back up. What is regenerative agriculture in the first place, right? Because I think they have this idea in their mind that it's almost a rewilding project or it's, permaculture or whatever. But here's my definition, and here's where I think I want to lay the foundation for the discussion. I think every farmer would agree their farm can improve, correct? Nobody thinks they're farming the perfect farm. So what's that path to improvement? And to me, that's all regenerative agriculture is. If it's just good agronomic practice, that to me is regenerative agriculture because you're being more efficient with your inputs, particularly, your fertilizers. Think about fertilizer prices this year are outrageous. So maybe we think about being a little more efficient with it, and I would call that regenerative agriculture because it's regenerating a natural cycle and it's being more efficient. And you could go on and on and on, and I hope we do. But Stu, does that make sense? That because there might be someone in the audience that isn't exactly familiar with us and our work, and I guess our definition tends to be pretty pragmatic. It's not permaculture everything. It's a very every farm is where they're at, and everyone can improve in one way or another.
Yeah, I don't want to go too much into it because you get into the finer nuances of the whole thing. But I am very much with you, Kyle, in terms of that. Wherever someone's at, I think there's a bit of it's regenerative agriculture has become quite divisive in the farming community, where people don't want to be, either do or don't want to be associated with it, and then it's very much a yes or a no answer. But I'm like you, Kyle. I think that wherever you're at, if we can do something slightly better, that's maybe financially improves you. If it's better for the environment, if it does, on a social aspect, it's really good as well. If you can do all of that, then wonderful. But every time we're doing something, let's look to try and improve something for ourselves on the farm. And the byproduct of that could be if you're looking and focusing on your finances, much like I did, then and the environment's coming along as a bit of a byproduct. Well, hey, that's fantastic. That's certainly not a yes or no. Because I think that idea that you have to say yes or no suddenly, it really polarizes people. That they think, well, there's no point in even doing anything because I'm already on a hiding to nothing. James, Matt, I don't know if you two want to wade in here with any sort of opinion. James, I'll throw you under the bus first. Come on, here you go.
I think we're a rented farm. We always have a rent to find at the end of each year, and I think that's probably the most risky situation that you can be in, because if it fails, that you can struggle to pay your rent. And for us, what it was at a point where if we continued on the path that we were on, we weren't going to get to a place where we needed to be. We were just going to get ourselves more, it was just going to get worse, or you get yourself into a position. So we knew we had to bite the bullet, but we wanted to do it in a very constructive way. We got forced into buying a drill because our power and drill was nearly 20 years old. It was getting a bit knackered. We were going to have to change it. So it kind of stimulated those conversations. Like I say, fertilizer prices went absolutely through the roof. What do we do? Do we go and buy another load of fertilizer that tests our cash flow? Or do we go and buy a bit of electric fencing and concentrate on trying to improve our grass management? I think our thought processes all came at the right time when it actually linked into when you actually decide, what choice do I want to do here? And the great thing is we've not gone back. And there's a point now where there's still things that we still use a few inputs, but the inputs per acre compared to what we started into what we do now, it'd be about 25% across the farm now, compared to what we were If we were on the same rate we're now, rather than buying one load, we'd be having to buy 4. So when you actually work out that possibility, and that's just a change in grazing practice, it started with, you go out and set a few paddocks in the field, and we moved them once a week. And there's a big thing. Is that electric fencing going to be a pain? We did it. Everything set up in stringent blocks to start with to start doing something. Dad always used to rotate them between 1 or 2 fields, but we started splitting those ones up. Bought permanent water troughs, did all that sort of thing. And you go through that point, you gain confidence, because that was actually a middle ground for us. That was something we felt confident moving into, and we saw a difference. Then you're like, right, okay, I'll go again. And then you start looking at more mobile fencing and water, mobile water systems. And I think for us, going from absolutely, sets, maybe sets are conventionally grades to they're all seeing what, now we're moving every 12 hours, sometimes our cattle through the summer and on draggable water troughs. The idea in our heads to go straight from point A to point B straight away was just too much. So we had to do steady increments and build confidence. And again, I remember, like I say, when Stuart came down to the farm, we were struggling to double our grazing days to allow enough rest. And Stuart just gave us the confidence to say, you need to hit it a bit harder at this point. And we gave the confidence to push forward. So it's been a confidence thing to build up to those points and test things. And the daft thing now, we just continuously want to keep testing because we know we can. And he just gets addictive in that format. So it's been a journey that just gets better and better all the time you're on it. And I think that's the thing, is you start small and you just want to keep going. And I mean, like I say, Stuart, I problem is we get too excited. We start putting hens in the mix and trying to do other things, and it's just like, that's the issue. And my brain is getting to a point now, it's always got to have something new going on. So this is what's great about regen, is there's always something else you can try. So it helps really feeds and keeps enthusiasm, and you feel like you want to be where you enjoy going outside. You know what you're doing is right, and you can see the difference in it, whether that's the farm, your finances, or the environment around it. Just all interlinks.
Good answer there, James. Thanks for that. I like that you focused there a little bit on the farm or the finances or there's plenty of different options there. I think that's the whole point of this, is that we don't have or I don't personally. However, Matt here might tell us he has a slightly different take on it, or he could very much agree with what we're saying here. So I'm looking forward to hearing from you, Matt.
I think you probably know that I'm quite keen on nature and I'm quite keen on soil. But actually, my fundamental role as a farm manager is to make money and make enough money that I can pay my staff well and house them well and ruminate them well and have a fun place to work. The fact that the journey that we're on is delivering really good environmental outcomes around the soil and nature is a really, really big bonus for both me personally and for the resilience of the business. And it pretty much is as simple as that. We're really fortunate in Scotland that we've still got our subsidy, and that puts us in quite a privileged place compared to probably a lot of you guys in England, in that we can keep pushing the boundaries and we can probably just charge on a bit harder. While that money's there, if we don't do it and make the mistakes now, it's going to be even harder to make the mistakes when we don't have that support. I hope that answers your question, Stu.
Yeah, it does. Yeah, that's good. It's very good. While we're talking to you, then let's tell us what this mission is. This, I know Matthew Benson, who you obviously work for. Had the pleasure of spending a week with him last week on the Dallas Mount course, which we'll not look back to today, but we're going to have a whole few hours talking about that, I have to say. But we'll talk about that again at some point in the future. But I had the pleasure of spending a lot of time with Matthew last week, and I was just quite taken with his drive and desire to prove to people on an upland scenario what could be done. And I just think if you could maybe give us a little bit more detail on what it is that we're trying to achieve, whether it's the story or whether it's the outcomes or whether it's the whole process itself, it'd be fascinating to hear a bit more on that, Matt.
Yeah, so we've got a list of kind of objectives on the board in the office next door, and you know, number one is to be able to farm profitably without the subsidy, so that we can use the subsidy to build new enterprises to create more opportunity for other people. So we want to build a business that is employing more people than when I started. So it would be very easy for me to come in and reduce the staff, rent the houses out, and just run one big cattle mob and sort of ranch it. And that's not the answer for Scotland upland farms. So we've got a really strong mission about people and creating opportunity for people within the business. And the people that are in the business need to have fun. They need to enjoy what they're doing, period. We need to make enough money so that we can pay our bills, etc. We want to build in resilience that allows us to weather those storms, whether that's really wet, whether that's really dry. We want to be able to weather input costs going through the roof. We want to be able to weather market prices falling. And we also want to be able to weather policy changes. We farm in a very beautiful area, and we've got the iconic River Tweed that sort of runs right along the edge of the property here. So we have a responsibility to deliver water leaving our farm, and we have quite a lot of streams and that sort of meander through the farm. We have a responsibility to put that water back into the Tweed in the best that we can. So there's a social side of what we do to be able to tick that sort of three-legged stool as they talk about. So yeah, but we can't do any of it without the profit. We have this mindset in the business that we want to see us fail at a few things every year. We don't want to fail at too many things, but we want to really push ourselves and challenge. When anybody sort of says to us, "I don't think that'll work," or "that I don't think you'll better do that," that sort of spurs us on to try and change that. So you know, an ability to deliver good money, good people, social stuff, and good environmental outcomes is just a win-win-win, and you know, it's a positive story.
Excellent.
And is there a lot of kickback, I guess, in the hill sort of, you know, that idea that we want to prove that hill farming is profitable? You know, I think that's a wonderful sort of mindset to have, to be out there trying to prove that. I just wondered, is there's still a kickback from people in the area about it? Is there still a bit of a farming can't be profitable here sort of mindset?
There's a kickback in perhaps some of the ways that we do things, and an interpretation of how they view that. So, you know, simple things like, I would never have the time to roll up and unwind fences like you do. Yet, my argument is, well, actually, it takes me a very minimal amount of time to move a fence every second day for 100 cows, and I don't have to sit on a tractor, and I don't have to muck my shed out, and you know, all of those things. So it's making sure that it's rounded in the right context. I have to be really clear here that we haven't got to where we want to get to yet, and we're still coming up against challenges and hurdles the whole time. Everything that we do on farm, we've learned from other people. So I'm not doing anything new. I'm just stealing ideas from YouTube and from the likes of you guys and from meetings and, you know, that groundswell, etc., and implementing them at home. But, you know, it's we have a QMS inspection, a bit like your red tractor thing, and the QMS inspector came 3 years ago to come and look at some outwintering of the cows up on a certain part of the farm, and was sort of like reasonably interested and was quizzing me about it, and came back the following year, and he came in to the office and he said, right, I want to go and see those cows on that hill again, because the ground was frozen last year, and I don't think I was seeing it in its true light. And it's been very, very, so that was in 2024. It's been a really, really wet winter. I want to go and see them. So lovely guy, but he'd sort of told himself the only reason I was doing it was because the ground was frozen, and needed to see it in a really wet winter, and took him up there, and he's quite pleased to see that the ground was still holding up, and we were delivering a really good outcome. So you've got to let people experience it. You've got to let people see it. You've got to let people challenge you. You've got to have these conversations so that you can tell them what you're trying to achieve, because sometimes looking over the fence, they can often jump to the wrong conclusion.
Yeah, that's some really, really good points there, Matt, you've made there. The whole, well, I could pick on numerous ones, but the one that I think resonated with me is that idea that we are going to have conversations with people. We do have to have slightly justifying what we're doing, explaining, shall we say, as to what we're doing. Because, like you say, I think if someone had been doing some of the stuff that we're doing now 20 years ago, when I was young and cocksure, I think I would have been very much judging people from a distance, shall we say, or making snide remarks, but actually when you suddenly start to understand stuff and things start to make a lot more sense, it's quite easy to justify to ourselves. There was also one other bit there that I really have to talk about. What you mentioned was the fences and the time, and I cannot agree more. Having had all my cattle outside till the start of February, and then bringing them into the shed to start calving. This week's going to be starting. It has been a nightmare since I've put the shed. So the time I've spent in the tractor is just about. I think I've done the same time in the tractor in the last month than I have in the last 6 months alone. So moving stuff around, moving feed, all that sort of stuff. I think I was scraping in bed the other day. It took me over 2.5 hours to scrape in bed and feed. And I was thinking, it took me 20 minutes to shift the electric fence outside. And it's just, when we talk about time, I think that's one thing that I hear a lot as well. I haven't got time for that. I haven't got time for that. I can't tell you how much more time I have when cows are outside as opposed to in the shed. So, James, I don't know if you agree with that as well. I know you have a fairly similar system to me.
Absolutely. I mean, like I say, we've only got to the point where we're trying to develop our cows to be a cow that'll suit out grazing, and this is the first year that we've managed to have cows out of area. We were hoping to have them out a bit later, really. We would have done if it wasn't for the weather. But yeah, I mean, much better outside. And I think I worked it out. Like, if you were trying to bale silage, from mowing the silage to then actually tipping the muck out, I think you're moving the same product like 12 to 13 times. So actually, when you've just been able just to do it and chuck it back out, and that doesn't cost you a lot, it makes sense. And it's just, nicer place to be. However, it would be nice if it was a touch drier and you weren't having to change your coat every couple of times. That would definitely help. But no, gotta have compromises. It all fits.
Yeah, Wendell Berry has a fun quote. If you guys know who Wendell Berry is, he said, "We took the solution and we turned it into 2 problems." I think that's the case for a lot of things we do. But Stu, if it's all right, I just wanted to jump into the comments real quick before they start to pile up. And there was one very pertinent. So Richard asked, Matt, you said very modestly that you're just pinching ideas and adapting them to your place. Could you tell us some of the best ideas that you've pinched over your time?
Yeah, great question. I think predominantly the biggest change since coming here is increasing the amount of grass we grow. So the simple fact around good grazing, and there's lots of debates about, short rotational grazing, long rests, but that has been an absolute game changer in the business here. We've had challenges along the way, like James said earlier when he was talking about water and fencing. To get the biggest impact, reducing the number of mobs, which needs infrastructure. So that's not always an easy one. The other ones would be around the bale grazing. So the bale grazing thing is probably a more recent thing than a grazing thing. I'm sure it's been happening around the world for a longer time, but we've become more aware of bale grazing in the last sort of 10 years. The bale grazing thing is again a game changer in our sort of harder hill environment. More so when we're buying those nutrients in rather than robbing them from a different part of the farm. And the other game changer is, not that I know anything about it at all, is understanding what's going on, that we don't know what's going on in the soil and the ability of what the soil can do. So one of the biggest light bulb moments here was, there's been 2 or 3, but one of them was that we could test grass in a field and test blood in the sheep that were grazing that grass, and they pretty much mirrored what was going on. So it was a lack of certain trace elements and minerals. Somebody told me to test the trees in the bit next to the field, and they were nearly there was nearly a copious amounts of stuff that were missing 4 meters away in the grass I tested. So somebody told me that, didn't really believe it would happen. And cobalt and zinc were the sort of, and iron a little bit, but cobalt being one of the biggest ones. So we have a massive problem with cobalt deficiency here. And for somebody to tell me that there's cobalt in those willow trees 4 or 5 meters away from where you've tested the grass, and blooded the ewes that also say they're short of cobalt, it tells me that all that stuff is down there. So the ability to stretch your mind to try and understand how you might implement that into a grazing system, and that's, that has led us down this sort of soil and composty stuff. But having access to people that can challenge your mind and make you think outside the box is probably one of the, is quite a big thing as well. But the grazing, for sure, getting the grazing 80% right, 85% right, is an absolute game changer when you're moving from set stocking.
Excellent, thank you for that. Yeah, that subject of soil nutrition is one we could talk about for hours and hours. But Stu, that's something you said 2 years ago. Someone said to us at one of our workshops, well, my soil's deficient in cobalt, but yeah, the willows, man, they're getting the cobalt. It's amazing. And you said, well, if your soils are deficient in cobalt, where'd the willow get it from? So you're exactly right. It's sinking down lower into the soil profile. And if we're only farming the top 15 centimeters of the land, think about all those unused nutrients lower in the soil profile, or even the subsoil where things are collecting. So yeah, exactly right. That's part of the beauty, I suppose, of the taller grass grazing, is getting those roots down deeper to access those nutrients and bring them on up. Yeah, so huge dividends can be paid over the years and the decades that we farm just from doing that.
And I might just jump in there, Kyle. I don't know, I didn't see the way the question was worded, but there is some really practical things around which trough to use, what types of fittings to use, what type, which is the best poly wire, which are the best. Should you use 2 mil high tensile wire? Should you use 3 mil? Should you use, all of those things? You get into the community and you start firing questions. A few of us are on, these WhatsApp groups, that hive mind that, should I put this trough in or should I put that in? Those are absolute game changers as well in terms of setting yourself up for the next 20 years.
Mm-hmm.
Totally agree with that. I think if you're spending money, throw it out into a group of people who've done it, and then you'll sharp realize where to spend money and where's not. Because I know when I started, I was bumbling around in the dark buying ungeared reels with solid steel wires, which, what a waste of time and money that was. So yeah, ask people who've done it. There's so many people out there now compared to sort of 10, 20 years ago that have loads of knowledge now, so just take advantage of them all. James, we're on the idea of stealing, on the subject of stealing ideas. Have you got anything to throw in there along with Matt's? Because Matt's was some really good ones there.
Oh yeah, I mean, like you say, I think all this is you steal that many ideas from different people. I'm always a big believer. You go to as many events as possible, and if it's a tiniest little thing that you pick up, it's been worthwhile going. And I think some of the biggest things, I think it's about just gaining more and more knowledge and confidence with it. I think a lot of the system, I believe, is building confidence and going out to see people and getting the right people to come and have a look and actually analyze your system and do it that way as well. I think it's always good, you know, you go to grounds where you go to these places and they document it and show it, and you try it at home, but it might not be quite how you want it to do. But having somebody else's eyes caster over it is also really important. So the networking in this is what it's all about, and it's another reason why I've absolutely loved this space, because everybody's so open to talk about what they can do, the problems they've had. And I think that's probably one thing that we missed when we first started in our local area. There wasn't many people that were trying what we were doing. And so you probably missed those opportunities to be able to talk to them. And I think that's the thing now is we're big believers in talking about the ideas, like saying Matt, so you get into these groups, get into these WhatsApp groups, be part of as many things as possible. I mean, the soil academies that Regenerate Outcomes did was just, again, thoroughly enjoyable, absolutely brilliant. Came with a different level of knowledge, and I'm still a big believer, and I keep telling Stuart this, we need to unleash Kyle at some point to get fully into the full biology of things. Even though Stuart and I say, you know, we like it tampered down so we know what we're doing, but actually understanding that biology and somebody with that such knowledge that, like I say, Kyle has when it gets absolutely down into depths is just brilliant. But again, you don't have to understand it all. It's a little bits that suddenly might think, actually, hang on, that clicks, that comes to an understanding. So again, it's just networking, talking to people, going to the right events, but also go to somewhere that tests you. I think that's the thing when you get to a point, you're looking for that next person to showcase that. I think there's a lot of talks that you go to that can be of a same level. And I think it's like, right, getting into the next one to saying, right, then, okay, that bit, because that helps. So constantly testing, that thirst for knowledge is key, and having the right people look across it and explain it. But we've made so many mistakes, you know, and like say Stuart said, you know, you go and buy the wrong stuff to start with and you quickly make the right thing. And even if you go on somebody's recommendation, it might not be quite right and you have to tailor it. But you just have that, you're gonna have that feeling, that understanding to be, I think, yeah, I can just do that. And it doesn't have to be perfect. I always believe nature isn't designed to be perfect. It's designed to throw things in you. So you're not there to create a perfect system. You're always going to make mistakes. You're going to alter it. You're going to improve it. It'll test you again. You'll constantly change. But that networking of knowledge is key. Finding that next bit of information to help you on your way is what it's all about. Because there's always going to be somebody out there with far more experience than you have that you can draw on.
Really well said, James. Yeah. So Renee brings up a specific issue that I'd be interested for you three farmers to talk about your experience and what you think about it. So to summarize, basically, she's asking, seems people need a certain level of investment in the infrastructure to make mob grazing work. And with the hot summer and lack of shade in some of the resulting paddocks, they haven't been brave enough to commit as they can't see a solution for the lack of shade. So in your guys' experience, is that something that you have worked through personally? You've seen other farmers work through, you know? I'll throw in my 2 cents, my James, I'll dig into it a little bit from the biology standpoint, but just from your guys' farm experience standpoint, does anybody want to jump in?
Yeah, I'll just make a quick point there. I had a fantastic guy working for me a couple of years ago called Michael, who sort of headed up our soils and compost. And we had a mob of cows grazing out the back here in a field called the quarry field. And we were sort of doing a taller type grazing. It was a particularly hot day. I think the sort of air temperature was sort of 23, 24 degrees, which is hot for Scotland. And we managed to find bare soil. We managed to find bare soil that day in the high 40s. We managed to find soil along the hedgerow at sort of in the 20s, but we could find soil in the long grass where it was still quite moist at sort of 17, 18 degrees. So my cows are black, but they are very, very comfortable sitting on 18-degree ground, as opposed to they will not lie down on 50-degree ground, and then they will become restless and they will have to seek shade. And that's so I think the power of having really tall grass in that hot environment, in a mob grazing system where you might be sort of, allowing it to grow a bit taller, can certainly be part of helping that solution or that problem.
That's exactly where my mind went to. I learned that from Dr. Alan Williams. He's in some of the hottest parts of the U.S. He works in the middle, and Gabe lives in the Central Plains where they don't have trees. They're grassland environment. They have no shade in the summer. So it's exactly what you're saying. It's that capturing of solar energy by your chlorophyll in the plants, and then you respire out that energy as a latent form of heat. So you don't feel it, and actually it's in the water droplets. And this is what I learned from Alan, is actually the underside of the animal is very that's where all the veins are, right? And so if you're getting cool water droplets hitting the underbellies of these animals, it's actually air conditioning, aircon a little bit for them in the summertime. But versus if it hits the bare soil, like you said, it's a sensible type of heat. You sense it, and that's when things, including us, we can overheat in the summertime. So it's all about capturing that energy and then transpiring it in the water droplets that keeps everybody cool in the summertime, kind of like the picture behind you. So, Stu, do you have any discussion topics on that?
Yeah, I guess look, there is a certain amount of infrastructure that makes life a lot easier, in terms of mains electric fence running around the place. Yes, that'll obviously make life a bit easier. Water infrastructure is crucial. So on those hot days, if you've got a good water supply, it makes life very, very simple compared to if you let the water get on top of you. Having gone from absolutely zero infrastructure and trying to force it to where I'm now, where I've actually got not great, but not bad infrastructure in a lot of places. We're still improving it, but having gone from literally just deciding to do it and trying it and getting caught out numerous times, the water infrastructure is really important, but we can really make big strides with that, and it doesn't cost a huge amount of money. I mean, I don't know about in Scotland there, Matt, but certainly in England you can get grants on water piping and stuff like that through the capital grant scheme. So I know James has taken a huge advantage of the FIPL grants, which is about 1 mile away from me, so I can't do that, unfortunately. But James has managed to be in the right area at the right place at the right time and taking advantage of those. So there is loads of different access to improve that infrastructure without spending a fortune, I guess. And then there's the certain things in the field if you're grazing. So much like in the winter, I sort of leave the sheltered spots, so that if you are on a nice day but you're in a sheltered spot, I just skip those paddocks and then I'll come back to them when they need them for those sort of more moderate days. And it's the same with the summer. If it's a really, really, really hot day, well, yes, we'll use those shaded areas, but if it's not too bad, I'll just skip those and save them for when I need them later on. So we can always go back to those paddocks to make sure that if we are concerned, and I think Matt and Kyle have sort of explained that actually there's not really a reason to be too concerned about it, because I don't think we have anything like the heat they have in other parts of the world. But if we are concerned about it, and maybe we are concerned that the water infrastructure is not quite strong enough, skip those shaded areas and go back to them when we need them. They'll always be there for the next time if we don't use them at that time. So we can be quite savvy with how we do things to make sure that we're not over exposing ourselves, I think is the right word. James, you got anything to add to that?
I think the other one, I think it's maybe just that we have a bit of genetic selection involved as well with it. I mean, we had a really hot year came through, and we had a few cows that didn't do well in it, and the loss of calves and they left the business. I think that's the thing is that we're not trying to shoehorn an animal into a system. The animal has to suit our system. So, if we feel like, we use a bit of Hereford genetics that have got a fully Australian history, so they're going to be used to a bit of heat and that sort of thing mixing with. So we try and maybe look at the genetic side of things as well as the soil benefits. So we're getting everything involved within. For us, I mean, I think the water infrastructure is the biggest thing for us in anything, I think. Because we've gone through a stage. We graze some herbal lays on an arable rotation, and the water can be a bit further away, and you think you've got cracking water pressure at the start, and by the time you get to the far end and you get those warm days, those are the bits that are probably a bit more, especially when you're using movable troughs, because you don't have a lot of capacity there in the first place. So I think water infrastructure, and I think as well some systems, that requires to get to a level of, depending on how many cattle you have and whether you want to run them in one mob. I think that's a bit that I think gets to a point is, we used to have like 5 different mobs of cattle, and you never really used to worry about water too much because you always had enough water capacity for a group of 30 cows and that sort of thing. When you start gathering them up and you start having a bigger mob, which makes your life easier, it then provides you another problem when it comes to water infrastructure. And like I say, last year really brought that to the forefront for us. So now we're having to think, right, then, okay, if we want to get to that next step to make our life easier, maybe that water infrastructure is something we need to upgrade. But again, I mean, we start small, you build your way up to that point. It's only because we get to this point now with the confidence that we want to go further that that's now become an issue. So I think it's one of those things you'll naturally develop and go forward, and you don't need to start big and spend a lot of money. And like I say, we didn't have a lot. We've never had a big budget, so hence why I've been trying to find grants left, right, and centre. Link in with different things as much as I can. And you look at some of the fantastic stuff people make. I mean, you go to Groundswell, I do a great one on like homemade bits and pieces of kit, what they've done for an arbor rotation, or how people have improvised other little bits, and it's just like, wow, these guys are fantastic. I mean, I'm shocking with a welder, so you get me trying to fix something and it goes all wrong. But say there's different elements in there what people create and do. So again, knowledge and using these places to gain that is great.
Thank you very much for that. Yeah. Again, I love quotes, and the one Henry Ford said comes to mind: whether you think you can or you think you can't, you're right. If you think it's not going to work on your farm, it won't. And you're not even going to try the process of, or start the process of trying to make it work, right? So you got to have that belief in the beginning. And that's what Stu was saying is so important, is that the pioneers and the early adopters in this space have had a few years to tinker with the system and try it. And that now they are sharing what they've learned and their knowledge and the system with others that are, new to the whole thing. So that's really encouraging for me. But really, for anyone listening, just if you don't think it's going to work, then it won't work, right? But you got to have that bit of belief, and you got to try it, no matter how small a patch. If it's 5 acres, 10 acres, if it's way in the back where no one can see you, give it a try, right? And like I think it was James, you said earlier, once you try, you're probably going to see the results, and it's going to be addicting, and you're going to want to do more and more and more as the years go on. But you just got to believe that it can work, and then try. Those are the two most important things for me. Would you agree, Stu?
Yeah, I agree with that. I think actually it takes us, especially initially, it takes a certain type of mindset who's slightly stubborn and pig-headed and doesn't mind being kicked a few times and getting it wrong, because certainly if you're going to give up after the first attempt, you're on a hiding to nothing, because there will be so many failures that it will be soul destroying if you're not built for that. However, if you're a bit more robust and you have that bit of, I mean, I know certainly the more people that tell me it won't work, the more I'm going to make darn sure that I'll prove to you it does work. That's kind of the mindset I have. So I think if you come in with that sort of mindset that, hey, we're going to make loads of mistakes, but also I'm going to figure loads of stuff out as well, I think that's a great way to be on, is that, the world's your oyster. You can really just go to town with it all and see what you come up with. And then, everyone's happy. I really appreciated or I really enjoyed your sort of quite encouraging moment there. But I actually thought it might be quite interesting to ask these two, was there any time or the biggest moment that you can think back on that maybe you actually sat there and thought, oh, maybe this won't work on my farm? In those early stages, what sort of things did you have to push through to get to hopefully where you think, yeah, it might work, but there's definitely going to be times when you haven't. I know I'm throwing you the bus a bit there, so I'll give you a couple of seconds while I retell mine, which was when I convinced everyone on the farm that we were going to do this mob grazing that we'd seen. Didn't really have a name for it apart from that, mob grazing, and I went in there with my ungeared reels that I'd just spent all that money on, and then set them all up and put them into really tall, mature ryegrass white clover mixes, because I assumed that would graze the same way as everything else. And for me, when I did that, the cows were very unhappy because ryegrass and white clover is not really suited to that very long, tall, mature grazing. So I turned them into something that I knew nothing about. I was using the mixes that I'd used historically, and I had cattle that were very much dairy bred or continental bred cattle who also were not suited to it. So at that point, I remember sitting there thinking for a second, oh, maybe this doesn't work. Maybe this is just a load of rubbish. And it's that thing of, it can be rubbish and we'll pack in and we'll be finished with it. Or we can sort of look at it and think, well, hang on a second, what's other people doing that's different that allows them to make it work? So for me, it was then went into that whole rabbit's hole of genetics, the whole lot. So for me, that was my moment when I do remember sitting there thinking, maybe this doesn't actually work, and I've been sold a pup here. But luckily, we pushed on and carried on with it. I've bought you both a little bit of time there to have thought about that as I rambled through that. So hopefully, you've got something to share with us now as well, you two. Don't rush.
God, well, I think for us, I think the first time I think when we had a poor PD on the first time we did it. You know, we had, like I said, we started off with dairy cross cows, and we had a poor PD, and it was just like, oh, you know, we've got more barren cows here than we want, and I think again, and her dad and I were having a conversation, just like, you know, is this a good thing? And then what we had just started wanting to go down more maternal route, and we had a few Anguses in that point, and not one of those had an issue. And it was one of those points in the moment where you were just like, oh, I really hope this is better next year, because I was stubborn enough to try it again. But if we had a really bad do the next year and some of ours didn't work, it would have been having some conversations, and I definitely would have had Dad pushing me on a little bit more. But there was always enough encouragement to keep going forward. But I think for us, I think what got Dad going is that you could see the benefits of it, and there was no other option to go forward. And I think the biggest thing that got me is when you actually first look into this, and you read Dead Silent, you watch Gabe, and you where he's at, and I think that's probably why it was such an inspirational story that gets you hooked, is that he was on the brink of everything failing, and he got there, you know, scratching with every little bit and just altering little bits, and you think, Christ, you know, if they can do that, we're not in that position. There's a reason we can do this. So I always hear people having worse stories than we've had that get through it and come out the other end. And I think that's for us, is like, right, okay, if we want this system to work, how do we make it work? What do we need to maybe alter and do it? And I think we were just getting sick from the point where we just have to keep doing it for everything else. And we're at a point that if this system doesn't work for us, then what else? Because the other system for us is just not going to work anyway. So we had to make it work. But there's definitely some moments you think, is this going to be a long ride, or is this going to be a couple of year jobby? I think that's the bit that you get worried in your head. Is this going to be like, yeah, everybody said it takes 5 years for your soils to transition from one point to the other. It's like, we can't wait 5 years for a yield drop or anything like that, because I mean, what we're going to do to pay the rent and pay the bills. But luckily, we've never had that issue. Yes, we've had an odd crop failure, but we had crop failures in our old system. You know, I think that's the thing, is that you can go back to the security net of what you always had. And I think that's a bit that Dad and I, we said, well, yeah, we have phases, and we may not have had one or two, but now we're actually, you know, we're not having those. We're getting in a better system all the way through. And we haven't really had a yield drop. We've just had an altering scenario. But I think it is just getting through those points and just thinking, no, kick on. What can I alter? Don't just give up at the first hurdle. You just have to keep looking.
Yeah, for me, I think James has just nailed it. I think I'm quite impatient, and I would say that my boss is also in. You know, if we're going to do something, we want to do it, and we want to do it and get on with it. The level of that, the point at which you get, shit, this is not working, is very much to do with the speed that you change and the amount of variables that you throw into it. So the problem with that is that then it's really, really hard to unpick which bit went wrong. And the one thing I have learned is that when things do go wrong and you can't unpick it, is get on the phone and phone all the other people that are doing it, and I can guarantee you will find the solution. Or somebody will pinpoint the problem, and it won't be anywhere near as bad as you think it is. And 2024, I've been here it was my fourth year. Things were feeling like we were starting to move in a positive direction. 2025 has been the worst year yet. We've had some really big challenges off the back of a dry summer and a few other things that were going wrong. And, it was a real challenge for myself, a challenge for my team. It's really hard to encourage people that we're on the correct journey when you've got stockmen that work for you that, really pride themselves in what they do. And you've got to be telling them that you're jumping in a positive direction. But our lamb growth rates are, 2/3 of what they were the year before. But you get on the phone and you have a ring round and, oh, I've had that problem. Yeah, I've had a very similar problem. And, that hive mind again, you come together. And I've had some absolutely fantastic conversations about these challenges after the challenge. And as long as we don't go bulldozing straight into the same mistake, we sort of, evaluate where we are, plan and replan, then we can keep tracking in a positive direction. The one thing for us is that we did go a bit cold turkey on a lot of those inputs. So we dropped fertilizer, we dropped a lot of tractor use, so we dropped fuel, and we dropped a lot of the feed out of the system. So we had this buffer of cash that we hadn't spent that allowed us to sort of ride a few of those first few storms. So we knew that the per head output was going to be lower, but actually our profit margin, even after some of those challenges, was still sort of reasonably the same, if not slightly better than when we're in the conventional system with higher per head output.
Thanks for that, Matt. Yeah, that is an excellent point. That we were talking about labor requirement dropping, but actually when you look at it in sum total, maybe the labor requirement stays the same. It's just what your time is being spent doing, if that makes sense. So it seems to me that the regenerative farmer is spending a lot more time on developing those contingency plans, because they're not just following one prescription, one set playbook, right? And that's how most farmers are. It's you get, I'm thinking about the arable world I grew up in. You get your prescription from your agronomist and you do it, and that's what you do, right? No matter, you might make a couple tweaks here and there, but the system itself is the same, and you're not doing much thinking about the contingency plans. But you hear over and over again, and I've heard from you, Stu, that you develop a plan B and then a plan C and then a plan D. And then when you go to plan B, then you got to start another plan B. If it's like a decision chart all the way down. And so there's that, but then there's also the marketing bit if you're going to get into direct marketing. So it's like it's the labor, it just changes, and people do hopefully realize in the audience and anybody listening that you don't have to do it alone. And that's really, just want to harp on that. And Matt, everyone on this has done a wonderful job of explaining that. But farming can be really isolating, and it can be challenging. You can get in your own head and pretty down on yourself when you can't figure out the solution to something. Just reach out. This regenerative movement, like James said, it's such a blessing because it's such a social network, and really take advantage of that and learn from each other. So well said, Matt. Didn't really have a question off of that, Stu, but I just think the labor, it changes, right? Like Gabe talks about his son. Now he spends 80% of his time doing marketing, but farmers, that's typically not their strong suit and not what they want to do. But if you want to get the benefits of it, you're going to put the time into it when doing things that other people aren't really doing. So anyway, Stu, do you have any other questions? I was going to maybe pivot, but if you want to stay on a certain topic, then I'll let you go first.
No, let's go. That's fine. Let's pivot. Let's see what happens.
Well, you know me, I'm a pretty, I like to look at things from like a 30,000 foot view. And so I was just thinking when you guys were speaking, you know, if your current farming system is such that you can't even afford to change anything up or afford to make a small failure, that in itself should really open our eyes to see, is the current system even working? You know, the topic of tonight is, can regen ag work? It won't work on my farm. But let's wait back up. Is conventional farming working on your farm? Is conventional farming, are conventional farming systems working in the UK, in America, in Canada? You know, I'm always thinking about that. And all the excuses get made for the conventional system, but none of the excuses get made for alternative systems. And so I don't know, that just had my mind thinking that if your current system, you're like, I can't do it because I can't afford, I have no wiggle room, as you say, Stu. That should tell you right there that your system's pretty fragile in itself. So that makes it all the more reason to look into an alternative system. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I certainly would. Yeah, I think that if you're in a position where you're working flat out and it's, you know, it's not for lack of effort, shall we say, or lack of work rate, and it's still not working, then how can we afford to keep doing that, if that makes sense? So, yeah, I certainly think that that we need to. No, we don't need to. It's good to open our eyes to different ways of doing things. If certainly if we're in a position of pressure and you're not happy with what's going on, it's certainly, you know, let's look out there. And I think, you know, we can touch on it a little bit now. Matt, we were talking on we went to the Dallas Mount course together this week, and I think that was sort of really good at just sort of helping to identify that there is different ways of doing things. You're not stuck in a paradigm, as it were. I think that was what was said loads of times this week, that, you know, people get stuck in a paradigm and think that they are stuck there. Whereas actually in reality, I think it's quite clear that we can go out and look around, and once we can make that decision that we have to make some sort of a change. Sometimes it's easier to make a change when you have to make a change. Whereas, you know, if you're already, I think the hardest people who are the least likely to make changes are the ones who are actually really good at what they do, because they're already doing a great job within their system. And, you know, it's certainly not for us to say that's wrong. I respect people who can make a great job of what their system. I think that's a really solid place to be in, but it's also one of the toughest places to sit there and think, well, maybe I'll go and start grazing some taller grasses with my sheep that I've spent a lifetime building up into a really performance orientated sheep. And I can totally respect that. And I think it's a tough place to find yourself. Deviating back to these two who are on the call a little bit, if you want to offer anything to that, that'd be great. If you don't, we can. I've got a question or two here, hopefully, that we can jump into. Stunned silence. Wonderful, wonderful. Yeah. So, in terms of your local network, shall we say, do you hear that and see that it won't work here a lot, or do you get more people inquisitive about what you're doing now? You know, how's that sort of changed over time, shall we say? I certainly know it's changed where I am, but I just wondered whether that was the same universally, or whether it's, you know, you're still the ostracized man up on the hills who are doing weird things. Let's start with you, Matt, because you're obviously someone who's not a local, shall we say, so being brought into an area, maybe you're ostracized anyway. So,
yeah, definitely. I mean, I've got a funny accent. I come from England, and you know, that rolls a Scotsman up straight away. So, and then I found differently. So, definitely at the start, there was a feeling that, you know, give it 18 months and it'll be gone. It'll all fall over and it'll be gone. I think now that they realise that I'm hanging around, my kids are part of the rugby club and the community and stuff, there is a lot more questions. We have quite a lot of people come on farm for various different events and stuff. Very, very rarely do I have immediate neighbours, or, you know, the guys just over the fence. Very rarely do they come, but they're definitely more inquisitive. The times that they're more inquisitive is when the weather is more extreme. That's the time that people can notice a difference. So those have been the times when people have stopped and engaged in a conversation that, you know, it looks like your bit's a bit greener than our bit. It looks like your grass is still growing. And the flip side of that is that actually because we're not winning, markets and stuff with really big stonking lambs or big stonking cattle. The flip side can be that, your lambs are not as big as, the last manager or Edston used to be. Edston used to be a really good stock farm. Question whether it's still a good stock farm. So, there's a flip side to that as well. So, I find it absolutely fascinating. The social side of all of this. The inability to be able to pull into somebody's driveway, knock on the door, and say, "Can I come and have a cup of tea and see what you're doing?" That I still don't get why that barrier's up. It's not them against us. It's about an industry all trying to move forward in a positive direction.
I'm very similar to what Matt is. I think we're very lucky. We're part of a really good estate, and we've got a landlord. We rent. We have different land arrangements, but our landlord is really key. He's also into this, and our neighbour, who's also an arable and pig farm, we've all tried to go on about it in different ways, which has been quite nice. We are predominantly the livestock farm, grass grazing system within the estate, but we have road frontage. We always tend to make the mistakes in the front fields. I don't know why. Everybody seems to see them, so we don't really seem to hide ours at the back. Always the mistakes always seem to happen right at the front, and they're the ones that normally you get brought up when you go to market. But again, it sounds we're not in those environments as much as we used to, because we don't need to be. We've just gone down a different direction. I think, like I say, we've been part of the Nidderdale ANOB FIPL project, and that's brought a lot of like-minded people together in the area. And you'll always find at the minute you get the same people turning up to those meetings. You do, there's more and more people wanting and interesting, but it is very much the same people that go to those meetings. It's engaging with them differently. And I think that's sometimes actually down to the wording of how things are brought across. I think some people think about regenerative and they just think, oh God, there's something, and they just don't actually get to want to know the interests and different bits of it. So I think there's elements of things where you actually can link in to regenerative in a different mindset, a different, nutrient management efficiencies that then seem to liaise with and link in with different people, and that seems to maybe bring a bit more interest. So I think that's something. And we've had some nice events on farm, and you got people who come out, and it's always, again, it's great. I mean, I'm a big believer. The more people you actually get around to the farm with a different set of eyes and looking at things. And I think we were going back to it before, when you're looking at a farm that's trying to start doing this, when you've always seen your farm in a certain way and you're trying to get to looking at a different way, you sometimes wonder how to do it. And I think that's why it's actually really important, if you can link in with the right people, to come round to yours, not just come round to them and say, just for interest, how would you do it? How would you implement that? And I think sometimes, like I say, we try and do things too much ourselves. It's like getting the information, but sometimes trying to figure out how to analyze it. And I think that's a bit where getting to these events and going to see different things and getting people down to you is really good. Even in our system now, I mean, like I say, good old Stu came over and absolutely found exactly where our issue was, and we haven't stopped since. And I mean, if Stuart hadn't come round to look at our farm at that point, would we be where we are now? Because it just, that different point of view, that different thing. But I always come back to it. It doubled our grazing days straight away, and we wouldn't have had the confidence to do it before. And I think that's the element that helps us get to that bit.
Stu, you're blushing.
Generous. Thanks for that, James.
I never underestimate that moment. That's a bit the dad and I both. It wasn't just in me as well. It was my dad saying, right, okay. And that sometimes is the big thing as well. If you've got other people part of it, maybe somebody else to reassure your decisions that you may be trying to discuss with others. I think that, they said two against one, that always helps.
I definitely agree with that. And I definitely think when you've got someone else coming on and saying the message, it's sometimes delivered a little bit easier with family members than it is, say, with yourself. I remember my dad telling me something once, and he said, "Oh, this guy's got a great thing, you should look at this." And I remember watching it and thinking, I've been trying to tell you this for 12 months and you don't want to hear it from me, but you're happy to hear it from someone you don't know on the internet. So yeah, there's that sort of dynamic, isn't it? But it's like you say, getting people on farm to come and look at it and throw their oar in makes a huge difference there. So Kyle, I see you've unmuted yourself, and I believe you've got a lot of questions here that we're going to have to cover. So let's get into some of those.
Yeah, we've only got about 15 minutes, so we do want to touch on some of these questions. But yeah, Alex, he brings up a good point. He said, Matt and James, you both have said your landlords are into this. How, if you're a tenant farmer, can you implement these regenerative ideas if you've got rent to pay and your landlord hasn't seen the light? Any initial suggestions?
Go on, James.
First, Matt.
Go on then. One of the most fascinating things for me is hydrology in the landscape. And you could probably ask every farmer in this country what their rainfall is, and they'll tell you. And then you could ask them all what their infiltration rate is, and they have, very often not even know what you're talking about. So we're going to get drier summers, period. We're going to get wetter winters. I mean, we've seen that in the last 5 years. If you don't have the ability to hold on to moisture, you are going to experience times when you either can't make feed and you have to buy it in, or you have to quit stock when everybody else is quitting stock. There's so many things about being on this journey that says, okay, we still need to get a lot of it right. But there's so many things that say, if I can just get this right, I'll be able to weather this storm. If I can get this bit right, I can weather that storm. And my argument would be, I don't think you can afford not to be thinking about some of these things. I'm not saying you have to go full regen and go fall into it, but there is some fundamentals about some of the principles that just say this is really good practice to set yourself up to build resilience into your system so that you can pay your rent. And if the question is about getting your landlord on side because he's going to jump up and down because it looks untidy, or you might start seeing a few weeds and they're not getting topped and your landlord's getting grumpy. I think very easy for me to say that's a whole educational piece between the landlord and the tenant, and I'm not claiming to know anything about that. I mean, James will know more about that than me. But also the biggest asset on the landlord's in the landlord's business is the soil as well. So to show him and teach him about or her about infiltration rates and the fact that the landlord's estate, its water is all leaving without nutrients or without soil erosion, I think is just a really positive point to start the story or the conversation.
I think Matt covered a lot of the points there. I think you got to bring them along on the journey. You got to understand what their context is. I know we keep talking about what they want from their land, where they see as what their term is, what they want, and then you think, right, and okay, you talk about where you want to go, what that involves, what that needs, and you have an open discussion and thought process into it, and bring the reality to it. I think a lot of this is down to communication of one form or other, and it just having and getting them involved with different things, and if they're not open to those things, you think, right, okay, if that's what I want, what can I? You got to try and find a way to understand their thought process. What would actually they go with, and that's all, you manipulate it a different touch. If you think, right, okay, I've got some sheep grazing here that is set stocked all the time because it's neat and tidy, but now I've got severe worm burdens and I've got other issues. I need to do it this way that actually then brings a benefit to you that may not have come in that different way. So there's different ways that you could analyze what you're trying to do. And for example, for ours, I mean, we've got some land that we have a landlord and we've had it for a long time. He predominantly likes sheep down there, but again, we had this worm burn and we got to the point where we could maybe paddock a bit up, and then we made a crop of hay off it because we needed to release worm burdens. But we tried to create different things within his system that would help benefit. As long as it's a step forward a little bit, it gains, and then the momentum starts going. He then let us stitch in some plantain and some chicory and some herbs into it, and because he saw the benefits of it. It starts small if it's that way, but it's understanding what their their aims are and how you can then slot into it and analyze it for your own gain.
Mm-hmm. That's a point that I heard Gabe say a long time ago was, there are so many benefits that come from regenerative agriculture. There's going to be a touch point, a center point that your landlord is really going to hook onto, and it's just a matter of finding it and then, telling them the benefits of regen ag and how it applies to if they really care about a certain bird species or butterflies or water quality, whatever it is, you find that, and then you can really, that's your entrance point. Yeah, so really good points there. Stu, you came unmuted. Do you have a point to say?
I'll keep it brief because I know we're out of time. Yeah, I just wanted to say that as a tenant as well, whose landlord wasn't necessarily into this, shall we say, or however you want to phrase it. I think you'd be amazed when you speak to your landlord how actually they are into this when you explain what it is you're actually doing and why and all that sort of stuff. I had probably what you would call a detached relationship with my landlord because there was always an agent there who wanted to go through the agent. And I remember the landlady now who said to me, just you ring me and tell me what you're doing and I'll be dead interested. And once you actually started doing that, you'd be amazed at how interested and keen they are. Whether they think they are or not, when you're telling them what you're trying to do, whether you manage to achieve it or not, there's no downside to them. So I think they very quickly appreciate that what we're trying to do is for their good as much as anything. So yeah, just give it a go and speak to them, and I think you'll find that most people are much more receptive than you might think they're going to be. So
that's a really good point. Thanks, Stu. Susan here asks, are you all improving hedge management, like laying bigger and rotational cutting?
I mean, I've just been in the middle of planting a lot of hedges at the minute, with one thing or other. And again, we've just gone in partnership with a piece of land, and it needs a lot of new fences, needs a lot of thing. Again, it's like, how do we finance this? So we're planting hedges to improve the fencing boundaries, because then again we can link it into grants while they're available. But also, this is a hill farm; it's got no shelter. So we want to make sure we get shelter. We are actually trying to plant more grazable species in the hedges rather than just going standard hawthorn and blackthorn. We're wanting more diverse. Again, linking with the principles, we want more diversity as much as we can. I haven't really got into laying. Ideally, it'd be great to actually have the cattle to graze them, so I don't have to spend money on somebody hedge cutting, and trimming them back. We haven't got a lot of hedges that have got to a point of hedge laying yet, but it would be again an interesting point to do. We just haven't got to that principle. But yeah, hedge management is key. Shelter, different mineral source, different vitamin source, bringing diversity, whether that's beneficial insects for crop management, that sort of more diversity in the landscape for us is really important.
Mm-hmm. Very good. Thank you for that. Renee asks, she brings up the Minette Batters report and the shocking stats that there are so many farms without a proper business plan. Do you guys think regen farmers have better real business insight to those still on the conventional path? I guess I'll start before anybody else jumps in. I think painting people with a broad brush is usually never the best idea. So, there might be some quote unquote regen farmers that are terrible planners, and there are, I know, wonderful conventional farmers that are extremely good at planning. So I'd say there's going to be camps of both in both places. But in general, as I said earlier, I really do think that regen systems, you're relying more on natural systems, the four ecosystem processes, more than just something you can purchase in a bag, or hitting the easy button, whether it be again a certain chemical or a certain fertilizer. You don't have that at your disposal, so you've got to do a little more planning in that sense, just in general. But again, I would just say I've met some of both great planners and poor planners in both camps. Would you guys agree with that? Getting a thumbs up?
I always think in one of the, you've got an intensive system where they're working on those fine margins and putting things through. And I think some serious, great quality business plans in every camp. I don't think whether you're regenerative, conventional, or whichever band you want to put yourselves in, I think there's people in every element of this. So yeah, I don't think just regenerative farmers are better business, but I think we'll probably look at things in a different light, and I think that's probably it. And how far you want to go in that down to business route is up to you.
Mm-hmm. I think
I think you've heard me say it quite a few times before in the past that if you're a crap conventional farmer, the chances are you're still going to be a crap regenerative farmer as well, and vice versa. Because if you're not going to do business plans in one sense, then you're probably not going to do it in the other either. So yeah, and I think like you, Kyle, you can get people in both camps, and that's probably what makes it so interesting, is that it's not a magic blueprint that suddenly makes you a better farmer. You've still got to be good at what we do to make it work. So whether you're on the regenerative or the conventional side, be good at what you do is probably the main thing. So yeah, that's it. Sorry, Kyle, carry on.
Nope, that's it. That's it. I think we've got a couple minutes left, so I just wanted to say thank you everybody for attending. Thank you to our two guests, Matt and James. We really appreciate your time and talking about your experience and your things you've learned. I know there are a lot of people that listen to these and find it helpful, so we really appreciate your time. Thanks for coming on.
Yeah, thanks, guys. I don't know if you've got anything you want to end with or any positive finale. I don't think I've made you both uncomfortable enough yet so far, so just thought I'd throw it in at the end here.
All I'll say, Stuart, is because we've talked about community all night, that I'm quite easy to find on Instagram on Nepath Farm. So if anybody wants to challenge anything I've said tonight, or reach out, or just have a chat, reach me on Nepath Farms at Instagram, and I'm happy to engage in any conversations.
Yeah, same as that. This is what this environment's about. Please, reach out at Mallard Grange Farm on Instagram. We have a website, whichever you want. But I think my biggest thing is take aim, is I think you're only limited by your imagination. I think that's for me is what it is that's your only limit is what your imagination is willing to go through, and for that I think the possibilities are endless. So just keep going, keep trying to find a way.
Awesome. Thank you very much. And lastly, I want to say thank you to our sponsor, Regenerate Outcomes. So if anybody wants to have us come out on the farm, contact them, and that might be a real possibility. So thank you again to Regenerate Outcomes for making this podcast possible. So, all right, that's it for me. Stu, any closing words for you?
Yeah, I just want to say thanks to the two for coming on here. I think we could have had full podcasts on both of you, to be quite honest, guys. The caliber of you two being on here has probably been slightly wasted here with such a short amount of time, and I've got a huge amount of questions here that I haven't even touched on. So I feel like we might have to have second parts for both of you here, because we haven't really touched on it at all. But I have thoroughly enjoyed you being on, and I really appreciate the time that you've given up for us. So thanks, guys, for that.
Thanks for having us. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much, guys. Loved it.
Thank you very much. Have a good evening, everybody. Take care.
Thanks.